morning, CMSD scholars and caregivers and everyone watching today. Today is June 24th, 2020, and Mrs. Gus and I are going to take you into the Cleveland Museum of Art today.
The pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic on which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Take a look at our standards for today. The first writing standard, we're going to be writing informative and explanatory text to examine a topic and convey the ideas. The next one, we're going to be gathering relevant information from multiple print and digital sources. And we're going to really focus in on the credibility and the accuracy of the sources. And we're going to focus on paraphrasing here today. The next one, again, another writing standard, is we're going to be looking at writing narratives to develop real or imagined experiences or events. And we're going to make sure that we use relevant descriptive details, and we've got some sequences that are in the correct order with well-structured events within them. And the last, which is one that's embedded within all of our lessons, is citing several pieces of textual evidence. So we always want to make sure that we're really understanding how to cite evidence and support of what the text says. Good morning and welcome to today's episode. I'm so excited because today I'm surrounded by art, which if you take a look, there are so many different types of mediums of art. And today we're going to be taking a look at the Cleveland Museum of Art, and we're going to be putting together our ELA standards with the paintings and the artifacts and just the amazing pieces that are there. We also have a special guest, Mrs. Hare from Clark, who is going to be doing a crazy good art lesson for you this morning. So let's go ahead and get started. Today, the first piece we're going to take a look at is learning a little bit about a man by the name of Claude Monet. So we're going to dig into a little bit of his background, of his story, and we're going to start with the journal, and you're going to see that so much of art and life is one and the same. And what's really cool about art, and I know because I get to see your artwork every day and you are all phenomenal artists, is that it's really important that when you look at a piece of art, you tell the story how you see it, much like music. So one piece of art, someone can look at and say, well, I think it means this. And somebody else can say, no, I think it means this. But really, you're all right with your meaning and your interpretation. And that's what's so cool, because we can get so many different meanings from one piece. All right, so let's learn a little bit about Claude Monet. Okay, it's my favorite time. It's journal time. So in today's segment, we explore Claude Monet, a famous painter. At the beginning of his career, he was criticized. You think context clues on this one? Some people insulted his artwork. Had he quit when this happened, the world would have been without many pieces of art. Instead, he persevered. Context clues. All right, so I want you to think of a time and explain a time in your life that you overcame an obstacle and persevered. So I want you to use complete sentences. I want you to use descriptive details and imagery. Remember, you're painting the picture. Explain an obstacle in your life and how you persevered, much like Claude Monet. So as you're thinking of your own real life examples, let's take a look at an exemplar, one that you can read and take ideas from. All right, there are so many obstacles that I've overcome in my life. One obstacle was when I had to stand up to mental illness. I had to put aside my normal way of thinking in order to understand how to deal with and support my loved one's illness. During this time, there were many sleepless nights and a lot of hopeless times. Sometimes I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing in supporting my loved one who was mentally ill. I was able to persevere, get through by researching mental illness and by letting the people who loved me support me and my loved one in the best way they could. This is a perfect example of how you can structure your own obstacle in your life journal. So before we start, we want to take a second and we want to talk about plagiarism, because whether or not you're talking about a script for a play or a piece of artwork or an essay you're writing, understanding the element of plagiarism is very important. So let's take a couple minutes and let's explore that. What is plagiarism? Plagiarism is a practice of taking someone else's work or ideas and passing them off as one's own. All right, copying without permission is stealing. All right, so it's the same thing as you wouldn't walk into a store, grab a package of Skittles and then walk right out the door. That's the stealing. It's the same thing as if you copy someone's words. That's their work. So when we are looking at artwork, when we are looking at writing, when we are looking at any kind of medium in the arts, we want to make sure we're focusing on paraphrasing, and we also want to make sure we're focusing on citing evidence and giving credit to the person who the artwork or essay originated from.
This is Grand Theft Info. Not Grand Theft Auto, but info, as in information. In this lesson, we're going to find out how to avoid being accused of something called plagiarism. Plagiarism is a serious offense because it's stealing, it's theft. Plagiarism is where you take someone else's words from a book or a website or some other resource, and you decide to try to pass them off as your own words in a school assignment. It's easy to do because most of us know how to copy and paste. But just because it's easy to do doesn't mean that you can or should do it. In fact, in many schools, there are severe punishments for plagiarism. In colleges and universities, you'll find yourself kicked out. And by the way, they keep your money. What exactly is plagiarism, you're wondering? Well, according to a book called The Instrument of Student Judicial Governance, plagiarism is defined as the deliberate or reckless representation of another's words, thoughts, or ideas as one's own without attribution in connection with submission of academic work, whether graded or otherwise. Did you get all that? How about we put it into layman's terms? It simply means that you're stealing someone else's work and trying to pass it off as yours. It might not be as severe as committing armed robbery at a bank or a convenience store, but it's still very, very, very serious. Plagiarism is where you write something almost word for word, also known as verbatim, and try to make your teacher think that it's your writing.
So now that you have an idea of what plagiarism is, or remember from what you were taught in class, we're going to talk about paraphrasing. So paraphrasing is another way to avoid plagiarism. And that's when you take somebody else's words and ideas and you change them up and switch them to put them in your own words. So in no means are you copying their ideas, but instead you're reading a passage and saying, okay, what did this mean? And then rewriting it in your own words. So we're going to take a look at Claude Monet and a little bit of his background. So as we do this, what I'd like you to do is to write down some key ideas and details that you hear and see on the next couple slides. And that's going to help you to be able to paraphrase this piece that we're showing you. So who was Claude Monet? Claude Monet was born November 15, 1840 in Paris, France. His family moved to the port city of Le Havre, France, while he was still young. He loved to draw as a child. He began drawing caricatures of people that were quite good. Even as a kid, he was able to make some extra money drawing pictures of people. Around the age of 11, Claude entered a school for the arts. His mother supported his becoming an artist, but his father wanted him to take over the family grocery business. Claude met some other artists around this time and began to use oil paints to paint the outdoors. A few years after his mother died in 1857, Claude moved to Paris to study art at the Académie Suisse. He was there for about a year when he was drafted into the army. He became sick with typhoid fever in the army and returned home a few years later. Monet continued to paint outdoor scenes. His paintings were becoming accepted by the art critics in Paris. He then decided to take on a large project he called Women in the Garden. This was a huge painting, over 8 feet tall, that he painted outside in the natural light. It was a normal everyday scene. He spent a lot of time on it, but the critics did not like it. He became depressed and was also out of money. Okay, so we're going to take a second and learn a little bit about typhoid fever.
Typhoid fever is a potentially life-threatening illness caused by the bacterium Salmonella typhi. In the United States, about 400 cases occur each year, and 75% of these are acquired while traveling internationally. Typhoid fever is still common in the developing world, where it affects about 21.5 million persons each year and causes numerous deaths. Although there are not many cases of the disease in the United States, it is one of many microbial pathogens that pose a potential risk of emergence. Salmonella typhi lives only in humans and is not known to infect other animals. Persons with typhoid fever carry the bacteria in their bloodstream and intestinal tract. In addition, a small number of persons, called carriers, recover from typhoid fever but continue to carry the bacteria. Both ill persons and carriers shed Salmonella typhi in their feces. Once Salmonella typhi bacteria are eaten or drunk, they multiply and spread into the bloodstream. The body reacts with fever and other signs and symptoms. Persons with typhoid fever usually have a sustained fever of as high as 103 to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. They may also feel weak or have stomach pains, headache, or loss of appetite. In some cases, patients have a rash of flat rose-colored spots. The only way to know for sure if an illness is typhoid fever is to have samples of the stool or blood tested for the presence of Salmonella typhi. Even if one symptom seemed to go away, that person may still be carrying Salmonella typhi. If so, the illness could return, or they could pass the disease on to other people. In fact, if one works at a job where they handle food or care for small children, they may be barred legally from going back to work until a doctor has determined that they no longer carry the bacteria. These are just a few things to know about Salmonella typhi and typhoid fever.
So Monet's painting was 8 feet tall. What does 8 feet tall look like? So the tallest man ever measured came in at 8 feet 11 inches tall. So that was pretty darn close to Monet's painting. Look how tall that man is in the picture. All right, so the tapestries that we talked about in Hamlet were often as large as 8 feet tall. So do you have a measuring tape? If you do, measure 8 feet and you will be blown away to see how large Monet's painting really was. So continuing on, war broke out in France in 1870 and Claude moved in with his new wife Camille to London. There he met an art dealer, Paul Durand Ruel, who would become one of his strongest supporters. At this time, Monet began to study the relation of the city of London to the River Thames. Despite the critics of Impressionism, Monet continued to refine, context clues, his work. He continued to try and capture the changing effects of color with light. He used a wide range of vibrant colors and painted quickly using short brushstrokes. Soon Monet's work began to gain recognition. His paintings started to sell. He organized an Impressionist art exhibition in the United States in 1886. In order to continue his experiments with light, Monet began to paint a series of the same scenes. He would paint them at different times of the day and in different types of weather. He painted a series on haystacks, the ruined cathedral, and the London Parliament. Near the end of his life, Monet embarked on his largest project. It was a series on the pond at his home in Giverny. It involved a number of huge paintings of the pond in different lighting and conditions, such as morning, sunset, and clouds. He called it the Grand Decorations. When finished, all the panels together were over 6 feet tall and nearly 300 feet long. During much of the project, the aging Monet was suffering from bad eyesight and lung cancer. He spent the last 10 years of his life on the project and then donated it to France in honor of the end of World War I.
Claude Monet was an artist who painted a style of painting that captures the moment in time that not only shows the scene as it is, but also how it makes you feel. Impressionism began in France in the early 1860s when artists started to paint pictures outside in the open rather than inside their studios. They wanted to capture the moments in time, but because light conditions kept changing, they had to work very quickly using quick gestural brushstrokes of paint. Monet was born in Paris in 1840. In 1872, he painted a picture of a harbor using very loose brushstrokes. He called the picture Impression Sunrise. He exhibited it along with paintings by his friends, who also painted en plein air, which means open air in French. This group of artists became known as the Impressionists after the title of Monet's painting. Monet painted water lilies in all seasons and in all weathers for over 30 years. In fact, he was so inspired by the beauty of the French village Giverny that he rented a house there and remodeled its landscapes, planted the water lilies himself to create a perfect scene for his paintings. The water lilies were imported from Egypt and South America as it was banned in the city. The city council thought he was going to poison the water. If he had obeyed the authorities, there would be no water lily paintings today. At first, Monet's impressionistic style was not well liked by critics. They didn't quite understand that Impressionism was not about the traditional, realistic, and detailed view of people and places. For Monet and other Impressionist painters, showing light and color in their paintings was more important. Despite the harsh critics in the beginning, Monet's work soon began to be accepted and respected as a form of art. Today, the Musée de Lingerie houses 8 of Monet's large compositions of water lilies. He had made very detailed plans about how he wishes to hang these artworks, and the museum did manage to install his artworks according to plans.
Paraphrase this biography. Remember, paraphrasing is using your own words to retell a text. This avoids plagiarism. So take a minute and using all the words and ideas that you wrote down, go ahead and write your own paraphrased version of Claude Monet's biography. So this would be an example of an exemplar that we would use. All right, Claude Monet was born in Paris, but his family moved to France when he was young. He absolutely loved drawing. As a way to make extra money, he would draw caricatures of people. This was a way of drawing that exaggerates certain aspects of people's faces. After his mom died, he was drafted into the army. Unfortunately, he became sick with typhoid fever and returned home. At home, he continued to draw. He drew outside, everyday scenes in the natural light. People criticized his paintings. He ran out of money and became depressed at people not liking his artwork. When war broke out, he moved to London, where he met an art dealer who inspired him. He continued to paint, improving his skills constantly. People began to recognize and appreciate his art. He became known worldwide and highly respected as an artist. Okay, so this is an example of paraphrasing and not plagiarizing. So we're going to take a look at a clip from the Cleveland Museum of Art. And what I want you to do is pay close attention to the real life events that are going on in the world as Claude Monet is painting this painting. And I want you to think about the real world events that are happening in our life right now. And think of it as if you were going to create this picture in your mind or on a canvas or on a piece of paper. How would today's events in your own mind look? And again, watch the clip and see how just really cool it is that he takes inspiration from things going on around him for his work.
Hello, I'm Heather. While I'm working from home, a painting from the CMA's collection is particularly in my thoughts. It's Claude Monet's 14-foot-long water lilies, Agapanthus, painted between 1915 and 1926. Monet produced this painting in Giverny, about 50 miles west of Paris, against the backdrop of World War I. The tranquility of water lilies suggests none of the turmoil that surrounded him in Normandy, but Monet was keenly aware of the war. His son and stepson fought in the French army. Troop trains regularly passed along the railway that cut through his garden. From his studio, he could probably hear guns at the front. While many fled Paris and Giverny, Monet remained at his home in relative isolation. His paintings of his water garden can be seen as his attempt to focus on the restorative power of nature and art in the face of destruction. Water Lily's Agapanthus is the left panel of a triptych, or painting with 3 panels. How did Monet come to paint this ethereal-looking canvas? In 1883, Monet rented a house in the village of Giverny. Over the next 40 years, he created a private garden that provided inspiration for his paintings. In 1893, Monet began creating a water garden. He diverted water from a nearby river, creating a pond that inspired many paintings, including the CMA's water lilies. Monet's aim in paintings like the CMA's canvas was to create an enveloping atmosphere of water, light, and air. It's been said that Monet thought of his pond as a kind of palette, and that he treated the lily blossoms as color accents. From photographs made in 1917 and from X-rays, we know that Cleveland's water lily painting used to have a flower called an agapanthus at the lower left corner. The flower is characterized by funnel-shaped blossoms in white, lilac, and blue on long leafless stems. In his late years, Monet made significant changes to the triptych and painted over the agapanthus. Slashing brushstrokes changed distinct forms into abstractions. Monet added veils of cool colors that enhanced the nuanced complexity of the palette. By eliminating the agapanthus, which would have grown on the bank of the pond, Monet departed from his more naturalistic view in favor of producing a vision that is without boundaries. We stand before the painting, uncertain of where the water ends and where the sky begins. Everything is weightless. There is no clear ground on which to stand, no horizon line. The painting is all water, light, and reflections of clouds. Small daubs of yellow and red paint in the lower right corner suggest water lily blossoms. They are the only accents of warmth in the otherwise cool palette. This painting is in my thoughts these days as an example of a great work of art that was created by an artist in isolation during a time of duress. Today, it continues to offer beauty, comfort, and solace nearly 100 years later. From my home to yours, I wish you health and well-being.
Some context clues coming from what was said in the Cleveland Museum of Art clip. All right, so the tranquility of water lilies suggests none of the turmoil that surrounded him in Normandy. All right, tranquility, does it mean A, hostile, B, peaceful, or C, suspicious? All right, turmoil, does it mean A, happiness, B, organized, or C, disturbance? All right, think and use context clues within that sentence. Well, if you answered that B, tranquility means peaceful, you're correct. And if you answered C, that turmoil means disturbance, you are also correct. So if we were in class at this time, we would do a think, pair, share. All right, so we would ask you to think about the world around us right now. So if you're in a room with someone now, talk about the real world connections between then and now. So let's now incorporate the literary elements of mood and tone into the segment. So mood and tone are 2 literary elements that help create the main idea of a story. The mood is the atmosphere of the story, and the tone is the author's attitude towards the topic. We can identify both by looking at the setting, the characters, the details, and word choices. And within art pieces, you also can identify mood and tone based on looking at the characteristics that are used to create the painting or sculpture.
created using Powtoon.
Okay, so next up, we're going to take a look at a couple different pieces of art. And I want you to be thinking, looking at these pieces of art, I want you to identify the mood and I want you to identify the tone. But I also want you to be able to explain why you chose what you did. Okay, so let's look at this first painting. All right, so if I'm thinking of the mood, well, what comes to mind? How about words like tranquil, peaceful, calm? All right, so now what about tone? Remember, tone is the author's attitude towards their subject. So words like content and serene come to mind. Okay, so now you're gonna do the next one on your own. Here we go. So let's identify the mood and explain our thoughts. Okay, so look really carefully at this painting called Gray and Gold 1942. Okay, so explain, the mood of the painting is what? What word would you put on that blank? And why? Okay, look at the details. All right, look how we are seeing differences in color and shade. Okay, looking at the dirt road and think about, where is this taking place? Okay, so here's an example to help you. The mood of the painting is foreboding and threatening. The peaceful fields of gold and simple dirt roads are slowly overshadowed by the immense dark clouds, signaling a feeling that something bad is about to happen. Okay, so if you were thinking along these thoughts, you're correct. All right, but again, if we were in class, it would be so cool because we'd have so many different ideas and brilliant thoughts all coming in about one painting. Okay, so now it's your turn. Look at the artwork and identify the mood and explain in descriptive details your reasoning and why you have chosen this mood. All right, so look really carefully for a minute. Okay, notice the shading, notice the light, the darkness, notice the expression on his face, how he's holding his hands. Notice his shoes and where the light is coming from. Okay, notice the images that are surrounding him. What's around him? All right, so on your own now, I want you to explain to someone in the room or think in your head, what is the mood? And how would you describe it? Why did you say it was what it was? So now comes our narrative writing standard. And I love this piece because what you're going to do now is you're going to take a look at a piece of art and you're going to tell the story behind it. So I want you to pay real close attention to the details in the picture because from there, you're going to be creating the story. Let's start with Leaving the Oasis 1880s. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Imagine you were a character in this painting. Write or tell a story in the first person point of view. Where are they going in the desert heat? Who are the people traveling with them? What will they do when they reach their destination? Okay, so you are going to create an entire narrative story around this piece of art. Next one. Who, what, when, where, why, how. This is the Red Kerchief by Claude Monet. Okay, the subject of this work by Claude Monet is his wife Camille. He captures an image of her through a window during a fleeting moment in time. What does Camille see through the window? Where is she going? What will she do? All right, so I want you to think and look closely at the picture. Create your own story, beginning or ending with this image. Okay, so now it's time to take a look at art in a different form. And what we're going to show you are some pieces of art and then ask you to think about objects that you have at home that you could recreate that artwork with. All right, so this is totally up your alley because you guys are super crazy creative in what you come up with. I love your projects, we love your ideas, and you kind of just blow us out of the water with things like this. So I really can't wait to see what you come up with. Let's take a look at the half armor for the foot tournament. So this piece is at the Cleveland Museum of Art. So should you ever decide to go and visit and see these pieces firsthand, you will see this here. So what I want you to think about doing is recreating this structure using only aluminum foil. Okay, so did you know that the maker, Pompeo della Sesa, he was the maker of this armor. He was the Armani or the Gucci of the 1500s. So he created these pieces of armor and everybody wanted to wear them. All right, so looking at this piece, if you have aluminum foil or if you have any other object that you think you could create this with, do it. I cannot wait to see what you come up with. I just think this is such a cool task. Okay, on to another one. All right, so here's another piece. All right, this one is Picasso's 20 Poems of Gongora. So it's the bust of a woman, hand to her face. So here's your challenge. Let's let nature inspire you in this. Can you recreate this using only sticks? Go out into your yard. Okay, so maybe there are no sticks. How about blades of grass? How about toothpicks? How about pencils? How about any small thin object that you could use to recreate this beautiful drawing? Again, what you come up with will just be so phenomenal. I wish we were in class to see it all. All right, so up next, as promised, the fantastic Mrs. Hare is going to show you another way of creating some art at home.
Hi there, my name is Mrs. Hare and I teach kindergarten at Clark. For today's art project, all you need is a piece of paper and something to draw with. Do you have your supplies? Great, let's get started. Have you heard of a Spanish painter named Picasso? You have? That's wonderful. If you haven't, that's okay. We're gonna learn all about him today. Picasso was mostly known for his famous abstract face paintings. Here's some examples of his abstract face paintings. Together, we are going to create an abstract face painting. We are going to play a little game to create our face. Mrs. Hare is going to roll a dice. It's going to tell us how we're going to draw our face, our eyes, our nose, and our mouth. So first, we need to draw a face. I rolled a 5. Let's come down and count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is what our face looks like. Everyone get your marker or pencil, whatever you're drawing with, and let's draw a face together. Thumbs up if your face is done. Great. Next comes the eye. Let's roll to see what our eye is going to look like. 4. Count to 4 with me. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is what our first eye is going to look like. So it's just a half of a circle. And then we're going to draw these spikes. You can color in those spikes. You can leave them. Whatever you want to do is okay. And remember, not all of our drawings are going to look alike. And that is okay. All right, we have our one eye. Next, we're going to roll to see what our nose looks like. 2. 1, 2. We're going to come all the way over to our nose. This is how we're going to draw our nose. All right, here we go. Go down and around, and there's a little swirl. That's cool. Then a circle. Got your nose? Great. Let's roll what our mouth is going to look like. 1. Let's come over to 1. This is what our mouth is going to look like. And you can see how already this is abstract. All right, we have our mouth. Now, if you're looking at this, we are still missing something. Can you think what it is? Yes, we're missing another eye. We have 2 eyes. So let's roll to see what our second eye is going to look like. 4, let's count to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, look, it's the same. Let's draw the same eye. I'm going to leave that one not colored in. So we have one face. Who's ready to do another? We're going to do one more face together before you can do this at home. All right, let's roll to see what our face is going to look like. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is what our new face is going to look like. So everyone's going to draw this. Here we go. All right, I have my face. Now we're going to roll to see what our eye looks like. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here's how we're going to draw our eye. Everyone see it? Great. Now let's roll to see what our nose is going to look like. 6 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here's the nose we're going to draw. It looks like an L, and then it has a little curly Q at the end, and then another little swirl on the other side. Let's roll for our mouth. 2. 1, 2. Let's come all the way over. This is the mouth we're going to draw. And for our last roll, our last eye, 2. 1, 2. This is the eye we're going to draw. Now that we have both of our faces, you can go and take anything you have at home, crayons, markers, and you can finish coloring in your face. Mrs. Hare finished coloring in her face, and this is what I ended up. You can add some hair, you can add a hat, however you want to finish decorating your face. You can also use recycled materials to create a face. You can use magazines if you have magazines at home. I hope you enjoyed creating our Picasso faces. I can't wait to see your faces. Thank you.
So we hope you've learned so much today about the importance of art and ELA and how both our standards and so many different mediums of art all really pair well together. So if you have the ability to go to the Cleveland Museum of Art website, I totally encourage you to do that. You are able to see and research so many artifacts, so many sculptures, so many cool things from the medieval times. And there's also some really cool lessons on that website too. That's where we got the creating the toothpicks from the painting or using the elements of aluminum foil for the armor. So there's so many more activities like that on their website. So if you're home this summer and have a free day, I encourage you to visit as well. It is such a beautiful place to be. So thank you so much for joining us. We miss you all. We're looking forward to fall. And next week, we will be here with you celebrating the 4th of July. Take care.
Good morning. This is a lesson on probability. It is one of the Common Core standards, which will focus on investigating chance processes and develop use and evaluate probability models. My name is Teresa Bender, and I am from Paul L. Dunbar Arts Enrichment Academy, and I am looking forward to teaching you about probability. Part 3, Experimental Probability. Experimental probability is the ratio of the number of times an event occurs over the total number of trials. So in the difference, really, what we're seeing is that you're actually going to perform the experiment and you're going to record your results. Okay, all my scholars, let's move on to predicted outcomes. Predicted outcome is taking what we learned from theoretical, but setting it up as a proportion. So let's get into this problem. What is the expected probability of getting heads if a coin was tossed 20 times? So we're not just tossing it one time, we're tossing it 20 times. So you need to highlight that 20 times. This is what's going to be different. We start off in our original pattern of finding the theoretical probability of heads. Well, the theoretical probability of getting heads is 1 over 2. But we're setting it up as a proportion because we're not flipping it just one time. We're now flipping it 20 times. So we're going to have 1 over 2 is equal to the ratio of x over 20. Because we don't know what we predict, but we know we're rolling it 20 times is the total. So now, taking a look at this proportion, how did I go from a 2 to a 20? What is my scale factor? What did I multiply to go from 2 to 20? Our scale factor is 10. So if 2 times 10 is 20, what is 1 times 10? Well, x is equal to 10. So we're expecting if we flip the coin 20 times, we're expecting heads to appear 10 out of the 20 times. Now, this is a prediction. It does not guarantee it's going to be that way. It's just a prediction. Moving on to the next problem. What is the expected probability of getting an even number on a dice if it was rolled 180 times? What should I underline there or highlight? If you said 180 times, you would be correct. Remember, we're starting off with the theoretical probability of getting an even number on a dice. Well, what's our even number on a dice? Excellent. 3 over 6. Now, set it up as a proportion is equal to what? X over 180 times. So now we have this beautiful proportion right now. How do I go from a 6 to 180? What did I multiply there? If you said the scale factor is 30, you would be correct because 6 times 30 equals 180. And 3 times 30 would equal 90. So x is equal to 90. Now again, we would expect an even number to appear 90 times out of 180. But there is no guarantee. It could be a few less, it could be a few more. Remember, this is just a predicted outcome. I know kids struggle with predicted outcomes, so we're going to try another problem. You have 8 dogs, 6 cats, 2 birds, 4 chickens, and 2 cows. What is the probability of not getting a dog? What is important that I needed to underline in that question? If you said not getting a dog, you would be correct. It's everything but a dog. So if we take 6, 2, 4, and 2 and add them together, I would have 14. So the probability of not getting a dog is, the ratio would be 14 over the total of 22. Now, moving on to the next question. What is the expected probability of not getting a dog if you pick 66 times? What should I have underlined there? 66 times. So now we're making a prediction. And we know when we make predictions, we got to set it up as a proportion. We take our original theoretical probability of not getting a dog, which we said was 14 over 22. And we're going to set it equal to x over, what are we going to put underneath there? 66. You are correct. So we need to ask ourselves, how do I go from a 22 to a 66? What was my scale factor? What did I multiply to go from 22 to 66? If you said the scale factor was 3, you would be correct. So then we have to take, what is 14 times 3? And if you said x is equal to 42, you would be correct. Now remember, if we are picking these animals 66 times, we would predict that we would be getting, we would pick 42 animals out of 66 that are not a dog. So it's everything but the dogs. Remember, it is a prediction. It does not mean it will be exactly 42. Okay, I really want us to take this moment to think about what observations of the differences between a theoretical probability versus an experimental probability. In theoretical probability, we're not performing the experiment. We're not flipping the coin. We're not spinning the spinner. We're not rolling the dice. We're just saying, what are the total possible outcomes? And what is the favorable outcome we are looking for if we just did it one time, or in the predicted theoretical probability if we did it multiple times, but we're really not running the experiment. The difference between theoretical and the experimental, you're actually going to roll the dice. You're going to spin the spinner. You're going to flip the coin more than one time, and you're going to record your information on a chart. So the big difference between theoretical and the experimental is that you're actually running the experiment and you're recording your results. Let's take a look at this simple experimental probability involving the dice. What is the theoretical probability of getting a 4 on a 6-sided dice? Well, there are 6 total sides, and the chance of getting a 4 is 1 out of 6. So we would say the theoretical probability of getting a 4 is 1 over 6. How many times is the dice expected to land on 4 if it is rolled 12 times? Well, once again, this is a prediction. We expected the 4 to appear 1 out of 6 times if we rolled it once, so we need to set it up as a proportion as x over 12. 12 representing the number of times we're rolling the dice. And if you look at the proportion, to go from a 6 to a 12, the scale factor was a 2. So we take 1 times 2 to get the answer 2. So we would predict that the 4 would roll 2 out of 12 times, or simplify to 1 over 6. The difference between the theoretical probability and the experimental probability is that in the experiment, we are actually going to roll the dice 12 times and record our data in a chart. So looking at our chart, we rolled the 1 once, the 2 4 times, 3, 0, 4, 3, 5, and 6 both twice. What is the experimental probability of rolling a 4 after 12 trials? The EP, which stands for experimental probability of getting a 4, is 3 out of 12. We saw that 4 occurred 3 times out of 12, or simplified to 1 over 4. The difference between the predicted probability or theoretical probability of 2 over 12, and the experimental probability, which was 3 over 12, were not the same. However, if we increase the number of times we roll the dice, we would expect that the experimental probability would be closer to the theoretical probability. Okay, now we're switching gears and getting a little bit more rigorous. I want us to look at when we increase the number of times we run the experiment. So we increase the trials. What observations can we see? So let's take a look at the problem. We ran the experiment twice. The first time we flipped the coin 20 times. See the chart below. Out of those 20 times we flipped the coin, heads appeared 8 and tails appeared to be 12. The second time we flipped the coin 100 times. The results were recorded below. Out of 100 times, we had heads 49 and tails 51. I want you to compare the experimental results with our predicted probability. So let's remember what we said about predicted probability. When we're talking about predicted probability, we're setting it up as a proportion. So to get heads, we need to flip the theoretical probability of getting heads originally is 1 out of the ratio of 1 over 2, or 1 out of 2, is equal to, remember, this is an expected probability, and we expected it x over 20. So what is the scale factor to go from a 2 to a 20? The scale factor is 10. So when I have 1 times 10, I get 10. So x is 10. So we predict that the number of times heads would appear if we toss the coin 20 times, we would expect heads to appear 10 out of the 20, or 50%. But in our experimental probability, we got heads 8 out of the 20, which can be simplified to 2 over 5, which ends up being 40%. Well, we predicted that it would be 50%, but we actually got 40%. And like I stated before, just because you make a prediction does not guarantee the experimental results will be identical. So we see that there is a difference there. But now let's take that same experiment with flipping a coin, but instead of only doing it 20 times, we're going to do it 100 times. So we start off with our theoretical probability of getting heads, which we all know that it's going to be 1, the ratio of 1 over 2, or 1 out of 2, is equal to, because we have to set it up as a proportion because we're talking about predicted, x over the number of times we tossed it, which was 100. So our proportion is 1 over 2 is equal to x over 100. Now, how do I go from a 2 to a 100? My scale factor was 50. So I need to take the 1 times 50, and I get 50. So x is equal to 50. So we expect if I flip a coin 100 times, that heads would appear 50 out of 100 times, 50 times. That is predicted, and once again, we're not guaranteeing it. So what did we get with our experimental probability of getting a heads? Well, our outcome of getting a heads was 49. Our total was 100. So we can say that was a 49%. Now let's take a look at our predicted outcome, which was 50%, to our experimental outcome, which is 49. As you can see, we're getting closer. The experimental probability is getting closer to the theoretical probability. So as we increase the number of times we flip a coin or roll a dice or hit a spinner, as we increase the number of trials, the closer the experimental probability will be to the theoretical probability. So let's recap. I can explain the difference between experimental and theoretical probability. Theoretical probability is what should happen, and the experimental probability is what actually happens after you run the experiment or the trial numerous times. As you increase the number of trials, the experimental probability should be closer to the theoretical probability.